Assalamualaikum and hi. First of all, I want to introduce my group members. Nur Shamili Suzy binti Halmi, Nur Adiba binti Johari, and me, Nur Fadila Atasha binti Abdul Hamid. We want to talk about termination of the employment contract during the pandemic. First, introduction. The COVID-19 epidemic has resulted in widespread layoff has away the closure of recruitment offices in other countries. The rule-related worker dismisses in Malaysia are founded on the concept of fair and away balance framework. The Employment Act of 1955 and the Industrial Instruction Act of 1967 govern employee relations in Malaysia. An employee can only be fired from just reason according to Section 20 of the Industrial Relations Act 1967. The word cause is not defined by law. Legitimate reasons for dismissal include excess employee misbehavior, termination of employment, poor performance, and legalities. Section 12 of the Employment Act of 1915 made it that an employer to give enough notice before being fired. If employer intends to terminate an employment contract, it is required to offer feedback to the employee on the basis of the termination. During the employee retirement time, to notice must be issued. When the contract of employment does not include to notice term, the employee is required to follow the statutory notice period set out in Section 12 of the Employment Act 1955. In Malaysia, all employees are safeguarded from wrongful dismissal by their employer. A due process inquiry or domestic inquiry is one of the procedures that must be carried out before dismissal because a wrongdoing may be justified according to Section 14 of Employment Act 1955. Next, my friend will be tell more about the terminal of employment due contract during the COVID-19.
Assalamualaikum. I would like to present a slide related about causes of dementia during the COVID-19. First reason is health reasons. In Article 76 of the Public Health Law, the people who are certain that they have a way of transmitting one of the contagious or epidemic illnesses to those around them are temporarily barred from practicing their professions or artisanship until the sickness is eradicated as determined by the Health Council. The employers has the right to terminate the employee's contract for health reason, which is in Article 76 of the Public Health Law. Employees with infection diseases or epidemics such as COVID-19 and other epidemics are prohibited from working in the company, and this is a set rule. Employers have the right to terminate the contract or service of employees from their company. In Article 25 of the Labour Code number 4857, which states that employers have the right to terminate their employment contracts due to prohibitions governed under the Act. In Article 17 of the Labour Code, employees prohibited from working as a result of COVID-19. In Article 76 of the Public Health Law, allows employers to terminate their employment contracts and take into account the working hours of employees at work must exceed for 6 weeks. If it does not exceed 6 working weeks, the employer is not eligible to terminate the service. However, the employers will not pay wages for the time the employee is unable to work because the employers does not have the ability to dismiss the employees without reason at this time due to the suspension of the employment contract. Next reason is for termination of employment contract during the pandemic is force majeure. Incidents such as fire, mobilizations, epidemics, earthquakes, and floods are examples of force majeure events. This cannot be predicted or eliminated as it is an external effect and not due to employers' referral and administration. For example, quarantine due to the outbreak like COVID-19 is a situation of force majeure, and this matter has been discussed by the Supreme Court. This causes the activity to be stopped completely or partially or working hours to be temporarily reduced. The employers may terminate the employment contract in the event of a case of force measures which allow the employees to be prohibited from working for more than a week at work without waiting for the notice period or before the stipulated period expired, which is in Article 25-1.3 of the Labour Code. There are several elements that allow employers to lay off employees. Number one, force majeure occurs in personal life rather than in the workplace. The second element is the inability of the employees to continue working due to circumstances that are not his fault. Last but not least, the element is continuous working in the workplace. I will pass the next slide to the next presenter. Thank you.
The last one is Rule for Termination of Employer Service. All employers must comply with the provisions under AK 1955 in relation to notice termination of employer service. However, the notice period should follow the term of the service contract or collective agreement and shall not be less than those prescribed in Section 12(2) AK 1955, namely 4 weeks notice if the employer has worked for less than 2 years, 6 week notice if the employer has worked for 2 years but less than 5 years, or 8 week notice if the employer has been employed for 5 years or more. If the employer fails to give adequate notice, the employer is eligible for salary in lieu of such notice. The notice in lieu of pay shall be paid in full no later than the day the contract of service is terminated. AK 1955 through Section 63 provide that the employer should prepare a statement or report to the Department of Labour in connection with the retrenchment 1 month period of voluntary separation, retrenchment, temporary layoff, and pay cut. The employment or termination benefit and temporary retirement Regulation 1918 is subsidiary legislation enacted under Section 60J of the Employment Act 1955. As such, the employment regulation apply not only to employees who protected by the Employment Act 1955. Regulation 3 states that the employer is liable to pay benefit if the employer is terminated from a contract of service or terminated provided they have been employed under a contract of service continues for a period of not less than 12 months. Rule 4 provides that an employer is entitled to payment of termination benefit if his contract of service is terminated other than for any reason retirement, resignation, or dismissal. While Rule 5 clarified that an employer is said to be temporarily laid off when the employer is not assigned any work for a period of not less than 12 working days within 4 consecutive weeks and not pay salary for or remuneration for the period not given work. Regulation 6.1 prescribes the rate of payment of termination and severance benefit as follows: 10 days pay for each year of service if the employer has serviced less than 2 years, 15 pay day for each year of service if the employer has serviced for 2 years but less than 5 years, and 12-day pay for each year of service if the employer has serviced 5 years or more. However, Rule 5 mentions a minimum rate in relation to preparation. Therefore, if the service contract or collective agreement mentions the rate better, the employer should pay a more favorable rate, or interest that the employer should comply with the clauses or conditions relating to termination as a result of surplus employees, and the rate of payment should also be not less than what stated in the collective agreement. All benefit or compensation which must be paid within 7 days after the onset of termination of the contract. This method has been prescribed in Rule 11. In addition, the employer should submit a written statement in relation to the payment compensation to its employer.
Okay, next conclusion. The timing of COVID-19 season have many workers unemployed. Thus it is hoped that all employers have a human attitude toward their employees during the COVID-19 pandemic so they do not lose their sources of income. The community should always making early preparation financially to be able to use during emergency situations like COVID-19. The public also need to be careful not to be exposed to the COVID-19 infection, which is getting worse another day, and go to get a vaccination. The employment need to have a considerate attitude toward our employees. That's all for we are, and we are hope you guys understand about the termination of employment contract during the COVID-19. And thank you for watching this video. Bye.